My name is Sammy Rahman, and the story I am about to tell you is not one I share lightly. It's not something I could have imagined even in my wildest thoughts. It happened on September 3rd, 2021, but the events of that day reached far beyond the physical world. What I experienced didn't just change how I see life. It changed how I see eternity, truth, and who God truly is. I had been an Imam for more than 3 decades, revered in my community, certain of my beliefs grounded in tradition, but death has a way of unraveling everything you think you know. I was born in Baghdad, Iraq, in a deeply devout Muslim family. My father was a respected Islamic scholar, known throughout our district for his knowledge and stern but honorable leadership. My mother was warm but disciplined, and she instilled in me a sense of devotion and respect from the moment I could walk. By age 8, I was already being praised for my memorization of the Quran. By my teenage years, I was spending most of my days at the mosque, studying under learned imams, fasting, praying, and learning everything I could about the hadith and Islamic jurisprudence. I never doubted my path. It was as if the framework for my life had been set before I was born, and all I had to do was follow it. Years later, after war and unrest overtook much of Iraq, I moved with my wife and children to the United States. We settled in Chicago, where I was offered a position as an imam at a well-established mosque serving a vibrant Muslim community. Life was good. I was respected, loved, and spiritually fulfilled, or at least I believed I was. I spent my days counseling young men about resisting the pull of Western culture, guiding families through faith crises, officiating weddings, and giving Friday khutbahs that people would travel from neighboring cities to attend. I believed I was walking in truth. That all began to unravel the day I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It was stage 4, advanced and inoperable. The doctor, a kind middle-aged woman named Dr. Patel, explained everything with a calm voice, but her words felt like ice water against my skin. I thanked her, nodded, and walked out of her office in silence. That evening, I told my wife, Layla, who broke down in tears. I stayed strong for her, but inside, I felt fear for the first time in my adult life. Real fear. Not fear of pain, but fear of the unknown. What would happen when I died? Was I truly ready to face Allah? I had devoted my entire life to serving Him, but suddenly I realized I had no idea who I would meet on the other side. Treatment began almost immediately. Chemo was brutal. My body weakened faster than I anticipated. Each day felt like I was being peeled apart piece by piece. I continued to pray 5 times a day, but something had shifted. My prayers felt empty, hollow, like I was reciting words without connection. I opened the Quran and read, but the verses didn't comfort me the way they used to. I began to have nightmares, dark dreams filled with voices I couldn't recognize, shadows chasing me, doors that wouldn't open. My wife grew concerned. I told her it was the chemo, but it was something deeper. Something was stirring in my soul. Then came the night I died. I had just finished evening prayer. I was resting in my hospital bed after another grueling day of treatment. Suddenly, a pain like nothing I'd ever felt before struck my chest. It wasn't sharp. It was crushing, like the air itself was being pulled out of my lungs. I pressed the emergency button, But before anyone could come, my vision darkened. The machines around me began beeping violently. Then silence. But I didn't disappear. I didn't fade. I woke up, if you can call it that, hovering above my own body. I saw nurses rushing in, doctors calling codes. I saw a Leyland hallway, collapsing into the arms of a nurse. But I felt no pain, no panic, just awareness. It was as if I had been unplugged from my flesh, but my soul remained alert, even more so than before. Then I was pulled not by hands, but by something deeper into a tunnel of light. I know how that sounds. I know the cliches. But this wasn't imagination. This was real. The light wasn't just bright. It was alive. It knew me. It saw every corner of my soul. As I moved toward it, I felt a warmth, a peace, a sense of home I had never felt, not even during my most sacred prayers. I heard voices, my father reciting Quran, my teachers guiding me through childhood memorization, my own voice during Eid sermons. It was beautiful. And then everything changed. The light dimmed. The warmth disappeared. The peace evaporated like mist in the wind. The landscape around me began to rot. What looked like a garden just seconds before withered into dust. Trees blackened. The air thickened. And the voices turned into screams, agonized, endless, horrifying. I recognized one of them, my mother's, her voice crying out in terror. I screamed her name. Nothing. I tried to run, but I couldn't move. My limbs were paralyzed. That's when I heard it. A voice. Unlike any voice I'd ever heard. Deep, thunderous, yet terrifyingly calm. It didn't speak in Arabic. It didn't speak in English. It spoke directly into my soul. "Sammy," it said, "everything will now be revealed." Before me appeared a throne, massive, ancient, radiating a power that pressed against every part of me. And on that throne sat someone I never imagined I'd see in such a state. Muhammad, bound in chains, his head lowered, his eyes filled with sorrow. I gasped. The man I had revered since childhood, the one I believed to be the final prophet, chained like a prisoner. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Then another image emerged, a Quran larger than life, opening on its own. Pages flipped violently. I saw familiar verses, but with every verse came visions I had never seen before. The Kaaba surrounded by idols, ancient temples, names I had read in history books, Baal, El, Ashira. Then I heard the voice again. "Who is Allah, Sammy? Have you ever truly asked?" I couldn't speak. My tongue was frozen, because deep down I knew I had followed tradition. I had memorized the words, but I had never asked. I had never searched the origin. I had never asked where the name came from, what spirit it represented, or what truth lay behind the veil of religion. I had only accepted. And now, in this place between life and death, I was being forced to face what I had refused to question. Yusef's awakening in the hospital was not the triumphant return that those around him imagined. The moment his eyes opened and he took in the sterile white walls, the beeping of machines and the faces of doctors relieved by his return, he felt an overwhelming sense of dread. He wasn't the same man who had entered that hospital room. He had left behind the title of Imam, the theological confidence, the neat framework that had guided him for decades. What he had seen, what he had heard, had ripped that foundation apart. He couldn't explain it, not to the nurses, not to his family. Even his wife Fatima, whose eyes filled with tears of joy at his survival, couldn't understand why her husband had become withdrawn and distant almost immediately after waking up. He claimed it was the trauma, the fatigue, the chemo, but in truth, he was shaken to the core. He stopped leading the mosque's Friday prayers. He told the elders he needed rest and time to heal. They understood at first, but weeks passed, then months. He no longer answered theological questions with the confidence he once had. He avoided Quranic discussion groups. At home, he grew quieter, spending hours staring out the window or thumbing through books he once dismissed as unnecessary. Secretly, he began to read ancient texts, comparative religion, history, archaeology, try and make sense of what he had seen. He found himself drawn to pre-Islamic writings and obscure references to deities worshipped in Mecca before the rise of Islam. The names Baal and El came up repeatedly, just as he had heard during his vision. Doubt took root in his heart, and though it terrified him, he could not shake the feeling that something vital had been hidden from him all his life. It was around this time that Dr. Thompson, his oncologist, began to check on him more regularly, not just as a physician, but as someone who sensed his internal struggle. She was a soft-spoken woman, a Christian, but never pushy. One afternoon, while checking his vitals, she asked gently, "Do you believe there's something beyond all this? Beyond religion?" It wasn't a challenge, just a sincere question. For the first time, Yusuf didn't respond with a quote or a lecture. He simply nodded, the tears welling in his eyes before he could stop them. She said nothing more, but her presence became a small comfort in their occasional conversations. She shared her belief in a God who longs for relationship, not just ritual. It was a concept foreign to Yusuf's experience, but something inside him stirred. The turning point came during a quiet night at the hospital, just before dawn. He sat up in bed, staring out at the sky beginning to lighten. The chemo had left him weak, but his mind was clear. He whispered aloud, "God, if you are truly there, show me, even if it isn't what I've always believed. I just want the truth." As the words left his mouth, he felt an odd warmth in his chest, not painful, not physical, but deeply emotional. A presence seemed to fill the room, not visible, not audible, but undeniable. It was then that Father John, the hospital chaplain, knocked on the door. Father John wasn't a stranger to Yusuf. They had exchanged pleasantries during his initial stay, but nothing beyond that. This morning, he entered with a calm smile and sat beside Yusuf's bed without speaking. After a long pause, he asked softly, "Have you ever had a near-death experience?" Something in the man's voice made Yusuf open up. He told him everything, the visions, the chains, the question about Allah, the voice, the darkness. Father John listened intently, never interrupting. When Yusuf finished, he waited a moment, then asked a simple question. "Did you see Jesus?" The question hit Yusuf like a wave. No, he hadn't seen Jesus, not clearly, But there was something in the light, something that had felt different from anything he had ever known. Father John opened a small Bible and read from the Gospel of John. "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." The words landed with force, echoing in Yusef's heart like a familiar melody he had never realized he knew. Something clicked, something undeniable. From that day forward, Yusef began reading the Bible in secret. At first, it was purely out of curiosity. He focused on the Gospels, hoping to understand who this Jesus really was. But what he found was not just knowledge, it was love. Jesus was not just a prophet. He was a redeemer, a savior, a divine presence so full of grace that it shattered every notion Yusef had of religion being about earning favor. He cried while reading about the woman caught in adultery, about the thief on the cross, about Peter's denial and restoration. There was mercy in these pages. There was truth. He knew he could no longer continue as an Imam. He stopped leading prayers entirely. Some members of the mosque began to whisper. Others asked directly what was wrong. But Yusef couldn't answer them. He was still wrestling with his heart, with fear. Could he truly leave everything behind? His reputation, his community, his family's legacy for this man, Jesus? One night, overwhelmed by the weight of it all, he fell to his knees beside his bed. He prayed not in Arabic, not in formulaic phrases, but in his own words. "Jesus, if you are who I think you are, please take me. I can't do this alone." As soon as the words left his mouth, he felt that same warmth again, but this time it grew, surrounding him, lifting the fear, the confusion, the sorrow. Peace unlike anything he had ever experienced settled over him. It was like the light from his vision had found its home inside his heart. The next day, he sought out Father John and told him he believed. He wasn't ready for the world to know yet, but he needed to take the next step. Father John embraced him and said, "Faith often begins in the quiet. Let's walk together." A few weeks later, in a private ceremony attended by only a handful of trusted Christians, Yusef was baptized. The water was cool, but when it washed over him, he felt like a fire had been lit inside him. Father John whispered, "You are free, my brother." And for the first time in his life, Yusef truly believed it. He has since begun to share his story cautiously, carefully, knowing the cost. His family has struggled with his conversion. Some friends have abandoned him, but others have listened, and he continues quietly and faithfully to live out this new truth. He shares with those willing to hear that Jesus is not a stranger to those seeking God, that repentance, even after a lifetime of religion, is not too late, that the love of Christ doesn't erase the past, but transforms it. If you are watching this and wondering whether the things you've always believed can be questioned, if truth could look different from what you expected, Yusef's story is a testament that it can. But the journey begins with humility, with courage, and with a heart willing to follow wherever the truth leads. Jesus is waiting. Will you answer before it's too late?